So as I said in the opening, peace is one of these kind of words that often when we talk about it, we're talking about different things. So I'm curious, what's the definition of peace that you are bringing into this conversation? What do you think it means? Quietness, stillness, calm, lack of conflict, justice. Friends online, feel free to also
Not
type in if you
hurting
like.
anybody,
What's that, Harima?
not harming anybody.
Not harming anybody. Other thoughts? The presence, like the presence of God or the Spirit, like, or your presence. Both and? Divine presence. Okay. Judy? Harmony within and without. The Navajo word hoso, is that correct? Hoso with a Z. Harmony. Beautiful, beautiful. Do you want to preach my sermon? Do you want to preach my sermon? You stole the whole thing. No, that's great. That's great. So we can hear from the different definitions, right? That sometimes we're talking about inner peace, our own individual experience of having stillness, being in the presence of the divine, being able to be in harmony with ourselves, the inner harmony. But when we're also talking about like community peace, right? There is the lack of conflict, right? You know, we talk a lot about like, oh, we just need to keep the peace, right? Like, don't say anything that's going to tick off Uncle Ted at Thanksgiving dinner, right? And we're just going to keep the peace, and we're going to pretend everything's okay. And then we have sort of systemic peace, right? Where it's this idea of lack of harm to one another, or even justice, that there is this idea that peace ripples outward, right? That it's like that if we work for peace, it has impact on how people live their daily lives. And we really get that within the Micah text. But I also want to highlight where we started with Psalm 46, so the call to worship. In both the Micah text and in Psalm 46, peace is often diametrically opposed to what? Did you catch it? There's a theme. I know, my pop quizzes are just so mean. When we're talking about peace, we are often talking about fear. So Psalm 46, you know, we take part of Psalm 46 out of context, really. That idea of be still and know that I am God. We all know that Bible verse. But in the context of that psalm, it's very much talking about like war and natural disasters and all of these other like forms of conflict. And in a significant portion of it is talking about fear and being made to feel afraid. And in the Micah text, it's the same thing, right? We are offered this vision of a world redeemed and restored, where everything is as it should be. And one of the key lines is, no one will make them afraid. So we have this contrast, right? That we figure out what peace is, sometimes by its opposite. So when peace pops up in how we're talking about it, what else are we talking about? And what do we learn about peace based on what it's put right up there next against? Right, so in both Psalm 46 and in Micah, we're talking a lot about war and conflict. But there is this beautiful vision in the Micah text of everyone having their own vine and fig tree, that everyone has what they need, and that we don't even learn how to do war anymore. Like, it is not even in the curriculum, it is not even in the water anymore, that everyone has what they need and no one will make them afraid. And so we get this lack of conflict, but not because we're ignoring conflict. but that there is no need for conflict anymore. Okay, so we can back our way into another definition of peace by saying in this image of what peace looks like, there's a lack of scarcity, right? A post-scarcity mindset, right? That everyone has what they need. We're not going to war anymore. We don't need to be afraid. And we get to just live and thrive and be. I don't know about you, but that does not seem to be how our society is set up. We might have made some mistakes along the way. If peace was our goal, if absence of conflict and not having to learn how to make war anymore, not having to be competitive for scarce resources was the goal, we missed that boat. And have everyone having what they need and not having to be, to feel like there's this scarcity that makes us have to jockey for position and I have to get mine and make sure that I'm okay, we missed that one too. Right? There is so much fear and so much scarcity at the root of how our culture is set up. And we can eke out little pockets of peace, right? So that inner peace, that inner harmony, we can catch tastes of it, where we can be present with ourselves. We can be present with the divine in our lives. We can even create little islands of peace for ourselves, where we get the quiet, right? We get to take that deep breath, where we can exit the rat race for just a second and regulate our nervous systems, right? We can do that. But there's this idea of, especially around social media, there's a lot of pop psychology that goes around social media. Have you heard the term protect your peace? The millennials have. Okay. So there's this idea that the goal is absence of conflict, right? So if someone brings any kind of strife into your life, that you cut them off, right? That you're protecting your peace. I've created my island of peace in and of myself. And if you are disruptive to that at all, that's it. Our relationship is over. It's a really common way of moving through the world, especially in like my generation-ish and a little bit younger. Right? This is a really common phrase. However, peace is not the absence of conflict, right? We know that it is actually more systemic than that, and that peace, unfortunately, does rely a certain amount on other people. Bummer. Right? Because in our rugged individualist kind of a way of thinking about things, if I have my own little island of peace and I can keep myself okay, I've built up a fortress then that keeps anything that disrupts how I'm feeling my own inner calm out. But with Judy's definition, it's inner harmony, but it's also outer harmony. These things can't happen in a vacuum, right? So cutting someone off to protect your peace isn't actually peacemaking. And there's a difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking, right? So we know we're not going to make Uncle Ted upset, right? We know how to do that. That's peacekeeping, right? I'm going to sit, and I'm going to be nice, and I'm going to pass the mashed potatoes, and I'm not going to say anything that's going to disrupt this nice family dinner, and then my mom will be mad at me, and there won't be fallout. Right? And Uncle Ted gets to just say whatever Uncle Ted says, right? And no one really asks Uncle Ted to be better. So what have we done there by allowing Uncle Ted just to be Uncle Ted? What has that done with the discomfort? What's that? It makes more. Right, because there's the discomfort at the dinner table, but to keep Uncle Ted and maybe Mom from being uncomfortable, we have outsourced all of that discomfort into our own bodies, right? So you are then carrying all of the discomfort of the painful things that Uncle Ted is saying in your own nervous system. So then it's real hard to hang on to your own inner harmony, right? Because inside, you might look like you're smiling politely and buttering your roll, but inside you're just like, this frickin' guy, right? But on the surface, everything looks okay, right? Because we have kept the peace, but what you've actually done is you've kept the discomfort. It's just in you now. And you haven't asked them to share it with you as an act of community building at the family dinner table. Because you already know how this is gonna go, right? Oh, you're just a snowflake. Oh, you can't handle it. Lib, are you triggered? Da, da, da. All the things we know, right? But what you've done is you've brought that all into your own body. So peacemaking is active. It is an active choice to say, hey, there's something wrong here, and I am not going to carry it by myself, right? I am going to ask you to help me create harmony between all of us. So that instead of having that disharmony only held in your own nervous system, saying, hey, I'm going to tell the truth. This is really uncomfortable. How can we fix it together? And then, yeah, that conversation is going to be kind of uncomfortable, right? But it is changing the dance steps of this system that has not actually been harmonious for a really long time. And you don't have to fight Uncle Ted. You don't have to come to blows over the turkey. That's not the goal. But just say, hey, there's something going on here. Help me fix this so that we aren't all feeling this. Tell the truth about the situation and help create a more healthful peace that addresses where the disharmony is coming from and doesn't make it your responsibility to carry alone, but the entire group's responsibility to heal. It's a different approach, right? We often think that our two options are just hush up, bite your tongue, get through dinner, get out as quickly as possible, and then go hit up the group text about how terrible that was, right? Or that the only other option is I'm going to fight Uncle Ted, and only one of us is coming out alive, right? But those are not actually our only two options, right? And the things that keep us locked in those two options are what? Scarcity and fear. Fear of what will happen if we tell the truth. Scarcity because we stand to lose relationship if we make any waves. Scarcity and fear cannot live in the same place as peace. So we have to address, what am I afraid of? What am I willing to maybe lose in order to create something that is more healthy, that is better, that creates a different kind of conversation, that has the potential to shift this dynamic that we feel like we've been stuck in? What is a third option? Because did you catch what was at the end of the Micah reading?
For all peoples walk, this one, is that what you're talking, the very end or the end of this part?
Yep, the very last verse.
For all the peoples walk, each in the name of its God, but we will walk with the name of the Holy One, our God, forever and ever.
For all peoples walk each in the name of its own God, but we will walk in the name of the Holy One forever and ever. That sounds like an antidote to Christian nationalism to me. That it says, we have our path, we have our ethics, we have the way that we move through the world, that we feel called to do. But there is an acknowledgement that other people are doing other things. My asthma has been terrible this week. So sorry for all of the coughing. It allows everyone to be who they are, right? Because that's also one of the fundamental fears, is that I have to sacrifice something of myself to be in relationship with people who I disagree with, right? That I have to lose my integrity in order to keep this relationship. Or the flip side of that, the other side of that coin, is I have to change who Uncle Ted is if we're going to figure out a way to stay in relationship together, right? That I have to change his mind, that we have to be, he has to be something different than what he is. But there's this non-dual way of approaching this relationship that says, I have my morality, I have my integrity, I'm not going to actually compromise that. And also, there is something that this person is also following that makes sense to them in their own heads. Couldn't be me, don't understand it. Like, it's not mine, but it gives us this opportunity to say, okay, they got here somehow. Like that it was a faithful process for them too. They got to this point in some way. They are following some God. Maybe we're saying it's the same God, but it doesn't look like it's the same God because the outcome is really different. And also, there is some reason that this is happening. But look, Uncle Ted doesn't have peace. Uncle Ted doesn't have inner harmony. We don't have outer harmony when Uncle Ted is around. There's something funky going on here. So then you ask the same questions that you asked of yourself. What is the fear? What is the scarcity? Why is Uncle Ted learning war? What would it be like if he had his own vine and fig tree, if he had enough? What is he afraid of losing? Suddenly that flips the whole conversation, and we can understand Uncle Ted a little bit better, right? We can say, oh, the same things that are driving me are driving And that's hard, because it's hard to get past our own sense of fear and our own sense of scarcity. When Uncle Ted is emblematic of everything else going on in the world. But if things are going to change in our interpersonal place, we start with inner harmony. What is the thing that I am afraid of? What is making me learn war? Why do I want to fight Uncle Ted? And then, rooted in that, we get the chance to offer peace back to him. Not as in a paternalistic way, right? Because it could easily go there. But saying, help me hold this space with you. Help me show up in this space with me where we can meet each other in this third place. Can we envision a world where both of us have our vine and fig tree, where neither of us have to learn war, where we can exist right by each other, where each of us are able to follow the path that we are called on and don't have to impede the other one? Can we see a future where that is possible? And in the circles that we run in, when we face those uncomfortable conversations, something new can arise. Anytime you have two polarities, anytime you add a third vector, it changes the shape of everything. That's why the two-party system is such a nightmare, right? Because we don't get the chance to see what a third option might be. We exist in binary, in black and white, and in intractable conflict, us versus them. Adding a third possibility, come meet me out beyond this binary and in a place where we can see each other as afraid, see each other as experiencing scarcity, see each other as not wanting to lose each other. Suddenly something else becomes possible. And I hope, right, I hope that that has ripple effects. I don't know if this is the systemic answer to everything when everything is locked up so tight behind political doors and doors that are locked with money. And also, I know that if we are going to change anything as a populace, we need each other. That we can't afford to keep cutting each other off and keep re-entrenching the types of violences that we keep seeing, us versus them. There can be a future where everyone has what they need, where everyone has their own vine and fig tree, where we don't learn war anymore, but it has to start with us. And the church is an interesting place to keep doing that work, to cultivate the inner harmony, the knowing of ourselves, the excavation of the things that we are afraid of, and lifting those up to each other and saying, help me find a way past this. Whether that's through contemplative practice or study of scripture or being in intimate relationship with one another where we get seen for who we are, that's transformative. We learn that we don't have to play by the same rules that we were taught. But it matters even more when we take what we learn here and experiment with it in our relationships. That these things that we have thought were intractable conflict don't actually have to be. That we can say there might be a way forward where we can offer empathy and say, what are you afraid of? What are you so afraid of? And how do we answer that question that you have, rather than everything that has come out of that fear? And there is where we build solidarity. Because we want a world where everyone has what they need, where they don't experience fear anymore, where they don't experience scarcity anymore. And so when we are committed to that for and with each other, everything is possible. We don't do solidarity super well because so often we are caught up in, I've got to get my justice. I have to get me and my group's way, we have to make our own way in this violent system. But if we can choose each other, choose a world where none of us have to fear, none of us have to experience scarcity, that is where peace is actually made. And that's where change on a systemic level can begin to happen because we are on each other's side, that we refuse that don't let anything, disrupt your own peace. We refuse that. It's that same sick sense of rugged individualism that says, I have my peace, I have my rights, I don't have to fear anymore, I don't have scarcity anymore, therefore the answer, we have solved the problem. That's not true, right? For everyone. We have to keep the vision for everyone. And that's really the vision of this Micah text, that we will know peace when there is no more fear, when no one makes us afraid. What a beautiful vision of what is possible. And so as a fruit of the Spirit, this is something then that we cultivate. This third way of being, this answer of possibility, this pushing back against polarity. What are the needs? What are the fears? What are the scarcities that are moving us to act in this way? And how can we think creatively together to do something different that creates more peace, that creates more justice, because these things are bound up together. And so, dear ones, church is a laboratory for us to try on finding that inner harmony and actively working to curate and create external harmony, both in our midst and outside these doors. Amen.